Well, welcome to Hot Topics for Small Business Leaders. You're looking at them right now. I want this to be a upbeat, fast-paced session. I know you've all just had lunch, but they're ready for your questions, so feel free to challenge them. Lots of questions. There'll be 15 to 20 minutes at the end. They will have their formal presentation right after I introduce them. So welcome. Thank you for being at our session. We've got great speakers here today. I'll start with Mr. Ken Dodds, the legend, right, Ken? He looks young, but he's really, okay. Is the Director of Policy, Planning, and Liaison at the SBA. His office is responsible for small business government contracting policy and regulations, small business size standards, and small business prime contracting goal for federal agencies. He represents the SBA on the Civilian Agency Acquisition Council and chairs the Small Business Procurement Advisory Council. Mr. Dodds has served many roles at the SBA, including Acting Deputy Associate Administrator, Director of the Office of Government Contracting, Senior Attorney in the Office of General Counsel, and Assistant Counsel to the Inspector General. Dang, Ken, you've been around the block.
Yes. 22 years.
Yeah, okay. He's a graduate of James Madison University. He received his law degree.
All right. Yeah.
Your questions are coming from right there. Received his law degree from the College of William and Mary. Ken, good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next, we have Miss Bianca Henderson. Serves as the Associate Director for NAFAC, Office of Small Business Programs. Bianca leads 15 small business advocates across NAFAC enterprise with a small business spend that exceeded $4 billion in FY18. Bianca obtained her MBA from Strayer University and a bachelor's degree in Management Human Resources from Park University. Bianca has 21 years of federal acquisition contracting experience. Following GSA, she joined NAFAC in June 2017. Bianca really enjoys advocating for small business utilization and finds her job very meaningful and impactful. That's important. You gotta love your job. Interestingly, Bianca's 11-year Marine Corps veteran. Even though she was honorably discharged in 2000, she still pops to attention when colors are played or if a senior officer walks in the room. I think there are a few of them, so you need to pop. And someone says attention on deck. Bianca, welcome.
Thank you.
By the way, Ken loves the Redskins and Bianca loves the Giants.
We lost.
It's all right, you gotta love them. Dr. Donna Peebles serves as the Director for the Army Corps of Engineers Office of Small Business Programs. Dr. Peebles leads Army Corps' $15 billion small business program and serves as a principal advisor on all matters related to small business. Donna provides senior leadership and direction to 60 dedicated small business advocates across the Corps. She is a senior authority on small business matters to ensure the contracting program and technical personnel are knowledgeable about small business programs, and she takes all necessary actions to include small business in their acquisitions consistent with the socioeconomic program objectives. We look forward to hearing from you, Donna. Welcome. And then we have the legendary Miss Mary S. Urey. She has been, now you've been around the block. Yes, I know you do, because you're a legend. Mary is the Director of Small Business Programs for the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, Air Force Materiel Command, Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland, Texas. She partners with industry and acquisition community to execute the Air Force Small Business Program. Mary has 31 years of federal service, including acquisition, contracting, and small business. She received her master's in procurement and acquisition management from Webster University and a bachelor's degree in business management from the University of Maryland. She received numerous certifications and accolades. Her resume went on and on and on. I really had to cut it short because she was making me feel pretty underachieved. So to make myself feel better, suffice it to say that Mary is the small business advocate goddess. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
And to introduce myself, I forgot to do that. I'm Geeta Murthy, the CEO of ROAR. We're a general contractor headquartered in San Diego, DoD contractor. Been around for 15 years, done work for Army, Air Force, Navy, and nationwide, including Hawaii, And I'm happy to be here, and I'm really glad for the opportunity to serve as a moderator. I will lead these wonderful folks. By the way, Donna, you're a Wisconsin Green Bay Packers fan, and Mary doesn't care for NFL. What's up with that? She's an NBA fan.
All the way.
With that, Ken, you're up. Thank you. Please hold your questions until the end. I would really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. There's a bit of a delay here on the,
Oh, yeah, I think
You
we
wanna-
gotta
you wanna do
take
your-
notes of the exits.
okay.
I don't work in the airline industry for a reason.
You want to do the silence?
Silence your
phones.
phones, please.
All
We'd
right.
appreciate it. And thank you to our sponsors. We really appreciate it. We wouldn't be here without them. And I think you're all been scanned, so you receive your PDH. All right. And the agenda for today, we'll have Ken start, and we'll have the other small business advocates chime in along with each slide. Ken will go over the FAR update, SBA rules update, big topic, cybersecurity compliance mandate, how does that impact small businesses, and then we have small business utilization and subcontracting, and then CPAR's guidelines, another huge topic of this conference. You'll hear more tomorrow. You've heard some this morning, and we'll talk about it here as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with the update on the FAR cases that have to do with small business that we're aware of, that we're working on. The first is the revisions to the limitations on subcontracting, which allow small businesses to team with other small businesses to meet the limitations on subcontracting. Right now, the FAR still says that if it's an SDVO or hub zone set aside, you can team with a subcontractor to help you meet that. However, if it's an 8A, small, or women-owned set aside, you cannot use that. And that's basically because of the way the laws were written before 2013. In 2013, Congress passed the NDA of 2013 to give us authority to create that limitation teaming arrangement for all small businesses. We had been working on this, and this rule also has a lot of stuff around the non-manufacturer rule as well. Initially, we were hoping that this would come out as a interim final, but I think it's been changed to a proposed rule. I thought it might come out before the end of the fiscal year, but it did not, obviously. But I still think this will be the next FAR small business rule that you see having to do with the limitations on subcontracting. And again, it'll be proposed, which means it probably wouldn't be finalized until sometime, maybe in the summer, best case. Now, there have been some GAO protest decisions where someone challenged whether the small business prime was doing 50% or more of the work, for example, if it was a service, or 15% if it's construction. And in like footnotes, GAO notes that even if they weren't, their subcontractor was small, and under this new law, you can use it. So I think you can kind of use it. It could be a defense if someone challenged your compliance, but the proper thing to do as an agency, if you really want to use this, is to do a deviation. There are ways to do deviations for an agency, or you can do an individual contract-specific deviation. That's the proper way to do it. Some agencies may have put this in the solicitation, and if no one protests, then by the time offers are due, it'll be part of the contract. So that's another thing you may see out there. But as far as the actual rule getting published, I hope it's going to be done published before the end of the fiscal year. Before the end of the calendar year, sorry. The second case that we have open has to do with joint ventures, and this is where it kind of gets confusing to small businesses, because back when we did the limitations on subcontracting final rule that SBA did, we also did a rule that had to do with all small minor protege and joint ventures. We changed the rule for joint ventures to basically say each entity has to be small for the contract, and they'll be considered small for that contract. Previously, we had a rule that said we were going to aggregate your employees or your receipts if you submit a bid as a joint venture, so you collectively you'd have to meet the size standard. Now, under our rules, each entity just has to meet it, and then you would be considered small. We also created the all small minor protege programs, which allows a small business or any other type of business, SDVO, women-owned, hub zone, and so forth, to joint venture with a mentor, which can be a large business, and be considered whatever the protege qualifies as. That's copying off the 8A mentor protege program that we created in the late 90s. Those rules are effective. They've been effective. You can start using them because we at SBA, if someone challenges your size or your status, we decide that. And we don't look to the FAR, we look to our regs. So our regs are what controls whether you're a small business or status. We are going to update the FAR, though, to make sure that the FAR kind of has the correct language in there. So that's a little confusing. The limitations on subcontracting, because that's the responsibility of the contracting officer, until it's in the FAR, they're continuing to use the old FAR clauses, and that's what it's going to apply. So that's why there's it's kind of confusing for small businesses out there. The third case that we're working on has to do with multiple award contracts and reserves, partial set-asides, setting aside task orders. This is actually from the Jobs Act of 2010. We did a final rule in 2013. The FAR was also amended in a very fast, bare-bones way in 2011 to authorize these things. So agencies had already been doing these types of set-asides. They're continuing to do them under the current FAR. This is a much bigger FAR case that gets into a lot of the other questions and policies. The FAR proposed rule came out in 2016, and for all intents and purposes, this rule is done too. It's just a question of getting the approvals and so forth and getting it published. The fourth case up there has to do with how the Part 19 applies outside the United States. The way the FAR is written right now, it says, this part, except for 19.6, does not apply outside the U.S. We've always said that the mandatory parts may not apply. Maybe the Rule of 2 doesn't apply, but you can certainly use our programs outside the U.S. If an agency chooses to do an 8A set-aside, for example, outside the U.S., they should be able to do that. Some in government interpret FAR 19, Part 19, as saying they cannot use any set-aside authorities outside the U.S. So we asked for this case to be opened. We're still kind of going around the wording to make sure everybody's on the same page. So that one's farther away from being published, I would say, in my opinion. The fifth case on there has to do with prime contracting, and that's the lower tier subcontracting rule that I think was in the NDA of 2014. We did a final rule maybe in 2016, and so we have a FAR case open, and we've been working on that for a while. The idea is that instead of just having a goal at the first tier and reporting at the first tier, that large primes will have a first tier goal and a lower tier goal. And as we proposed it, as subcontractors report, that have subcontracting plans report, it would count towards your lower tier goals as a prime. We've also heard from some in the construction industry that want to basically report on all their lower tier subcontracting, even if there's no lower tier subcontracting plan required. And so there's also been, because of the way the law was written, this says you shall do this, so if you have an individual plan, this would apply to you. There's been some proposed legislation to make it a may, so it would be more at your discretion as a prime, but that didn't pass. So I don't know if that'll pop up again in the NDA of 2020. And then the last case has to do with construction contract administration, and this comes from the complaints that come from small businesses like you at conferences like this around equitable adjustments. And it's in the NDA of 2019 basically tells, I think it's just DOD, I'd have to look at the statute, but they need to come up with a policy on how they respond to equitable adjustments, and then agencies are going to report on their performance in responding to requests for equitable adjustment. Let's go to the next slide. You guys have any comments on any of those cases?
So I did. Can we go back one slide? I have to remember which one. The applicability of small business OCONUS, so the regulations OCONUS. I can tell you for AFCEC's purposes, we don't look at FAR Part 19 and say it doesn't apply overseas. We can't make them do a set-aside OCONUS, but we certainly encourage that based on our market research, and that's evidenced in multiple of our contracts that we have actually taken the OCONUS piece and included it in a small business set-aside. So if you're working for AFCEC and you see something in FedBizOps and it's OCONUS, don't think, well, I'm a small business, so I'm not going to reply to the RFI. Please go ahead and reply to it, because we've been successful in doing set-asides OCONUS. Yeah,
and there's some interesting backstory to this. I mean, the only part of the Small Business Act that talks about overseas really is that for subcontract plans, Section 8D says that it doesn't apply. So everything else, we would argue, it does apply, therefore, because they didn't say that. Also, back in the 90s, a small business overseas was found non-responsible, and they went to they said they should get a certificate of competencies, which is something SBA can do. If you find a small business non-responsible, they're supposed to refer to us for a COC. And in that case, the agency didn't, because the FAR said it didn't apply. All of 19 didn't apply outside the U.S. And they went to GAO, and GAO said, well, the statute doesn't say that. It doesn't say that it doesn't apply. So now, right now, the way it's written, it says this part besides 19.6 doesn't apply outside the U.S., which is the certificate of competency part of it.
But it doesn't say we can't do it.
I agree with you,
So,
but
yeah.
but there are, I hope none of these folks up here, but there are some in government, especially at DOD, that say it's prohibited, and so that's why we're trying to clear that language up, and it's hard to get the language that makes everyone happy.
Right.
I think there was a question about SAM. Is this something that that you guys are aware of? That you gotta, first of all, you had to have this notarized letter stating you're authorized entity to administer your SAM profile, and then all entities must be in SAM by the bid date, effective October 26th this week. And if you're not, the FAR says you're ineligible to submit offers and quotes. So I'm going to move on now to some of SBA's rules. I mentioned previously the All Small Mentor Protege program. We have two programs right now. 8A was created in the late 80s or the late 90s, and we kind of kept that program going because it was working. When we stood up our All Small, we didn't know how many people we would get. We didn't know if our system would work. We didn't know how smoothly it would go. I'm happy to report it's going very well. We use certified.gov. You apply through that. You get approved through that. We communicate you through this online portal. It takes a couple weeks to get approved, whereas the 8A may take several months. And we have over 650 approved mentor protege relationships at this point. And then going forward, we're hoping to get, they have to report to us on the contracts and things that they're doing. So hopefully we'll have more information on whether it's successful in terms of getting contracts and providing the assistance that the mentor is supposed to provide the protege. So we are working on a proposed rule to do that. That's probably early spring would be the earliest you would probably see that published as a proposed rule. Let's go to the next one. Women-owned certification. Based on the NDA of 2015, we are supposed to create a certification program for all women-owned small businesses. Until we issue a final rule, it continues to be a self-certification process, but you have to upload your ownership and control documents to certified.gov. So it's a step beyond self-certification. Those documents are supposed to be in Certify. The contracting officer is supposed to look to see if they're there. They don't always do that. But if it's a women-owned set-aside or a women-owned sole source, that's what the process is right now. So until we are going to publish a proposed rule, get comments, and then finalize a rule. And until we have a final rule with an effective date, it continues to be a self-certification program with that document requirement. Today, we actually issued a proposed rule on the Hub Zone program. The Hub Zone program, which is for historically underutilized business zones, is about giving preferences and set-asides and sole source authority for firms that are located in hub zones and that employ at least 35% of their residents are hub zone employees. Over the years, we've had a 3% goal government-wide. Most agencies struggle to meet it. The government has never met the 3% goal. We've been in 2% is some of the highest we've done. 2.2 or 3 is the best we've ever done as a government. The program was kind of created with very strict requirements, much more strict than our other programs, and we're trying to figure out if we can make compliance a little easier, because as a small business, if one of your employees quits and now you're out of compliance, you really don't have any control over how your employment can fluctuate day to day. So in this proposed rule, we're thinking about whether if you employ someone that was a hub zone resident, as long as that person stays employed by you, they should continue to count as a hub zone employee. We don't want to give you an incentive to fire someone because they move or because their census tract changes where they live and now they're not a hub zone employee. So the whole point of this program is employment. We should give someone, if they hire a hub zone employee, let that continue to count. That's one of the ideas we have in this proposed rule that came out actually today.
So I just want to add, nothing to do with this rule. Please don't certify or tell us, and as SBA is certified now, but please don't tell us that you're a hub zone firm if you're not. We had a hub zone set aside with one of my customers. We went through all the evaluations. We selected the contractor, got a size challenge, went to the SBA, and sure enough, they were not a hub zone. And their response was, well, nobody checks. So, okay, so we went to the next person in line, got a size challenge, they were not a hub zone. That customer's probably lost to me forever for wanting to do a hub zone set aside because of that process. So this may make it a little bit easier as the rules relax a little bit, but the response was, nobody ever checks. To me, that's fraud. But
Yeah, and I can tell you, as an agency, the only way you're going to get credit in FPDS is because we've certified them. We control that, so you can't self-certify for Hub Zone or 8A. So, you know, as an agency, you're going to definitely be lost if you go through all that trouble.
right,
There, you know, and of course, you can get prosecuted for, you know, misrepresenting your status.
so please only tell us you are what you are.
And one of the things we're trying to address is that the way the Hub Zone program says you have to be eligible at time of offer and award has always been challenging, because you can go look at your employment roles and see that you have 35% employees when you make your offer. You don't know when it's going to be awarded. It could be a year from now, 2 years from now, 6 months from now. And on that day, 2 people quit that live in a Hub Zone, you may be out of compliance through no fault of your own. So we're proposing to change that to at least be, we could change it to be just at time of offer like every other small business program, or we have an idea where we would just check annually to see whether you have 35%. So for that whole year, whatever, you know, you'll be able to fluctuate, because you can already fluctuate when you get a contract. You have to attempt to maintain that 35% employment requirement. So trying to make it so that it's not so much a compliance problem for this particular program. Another good thing I'll highlight about Hub Zone, and I think we did improve as a government in FY18 in terms of our performance, is that the NDA of 2017 froze the maps until at least basically 2021. Previously, you know, they would change sometimes every year, and as a business, you can't pick up and move if you have a established office, and of course, your employees can't just pick up and move just because they're no longer in a Hub Zone. So the idea is now it's gonna be frozen until 2021, and we're only gonna look at it every 5 years. And if your census tract changes, you get a redesignation period of 3 years. So it's almost like 8 years. So we're telling you, go ahead and invest in those areas, hire those people. They'll count, you know, for at least 8 years now, instead of changing year to year. So that also, I hope, will help improve the program. All right, let's see what's next. Service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. This continues to be a self-certification program with SBA doing protests for the entire government, except for the VA. If you want to do business with the VA, you have to be certified by the VA. There's been some discussion or talk or proposals around creating a certification program for the entire federal government. The question there comes down to funding and having the resources to do that, because right now there's, I think, 14,000 or more, something like that, certified VA SDVO firms, and that's just for firms that want to do business with the VA. There's probably 20,000 more self-certified SDVOs out there. So the amount of time and resources and effort that the VA is spending would be doubled or tripled if we wanted to do this government-wide. The other complicating factor is that the VA did not get an appropriation to set up their program. They use fees through their contracts to pay for it. So it's a difficult way to get the money to do it if you wanted to transfer it from the VA to SBA. So right now, I haven't seen any, you know, specific, we've had proposals over the years, but I'm not sure that this will happen. There's been a lot of discussion about it. It seems like a good idea. How are we going to do it, and where are the resources going to come from to do it is the question that we'll have to deal with. Until such time as we have one, like I said, it's a self-certification program for everyone but the VA. And we do handle protests at SBA, so an offeror doesn't think the firm's eligible, they should definitely protest that to us if they have evidence to show that it's not really being owned and controlled by a service-disabled veteran. We also did issue a rule in October that creates a uniform ownership and control regulation that's going to be used by both the SBA and VA, because there were some discrepancies between the two. Now we're operating under the same guidelines. Plus, if you're a veteran and a service-disabled veteran, and you go to the VA and you either don't like their decision saying you're not eligible, or there's a protest about your status at the VA, those will now be decided by SBA's Office of Hearings and Appeals, the same organization that looks at size protests and things like that. So instead of staying inside the VA, it'll now be handled by SBA effective October 1. All right. We've had a lot of discussions about joint ventures over the years with agencies. Some agencies started to write their solicitations and not allow joint ventures to submit bids for their particular contracts. And just recently we were successful in pointing out to GSA for the Oasis contract that there are two laws that basically say for these types of contracts, if they're big, there's the thresholds there. It's like $8 million for DoD, or other type, or bundling, or any type of contract like that. That you need to not only accept the joint venture proposals, but you also should consider the capabilities of the members of the joint venture. Because we also saw solicitations that were being written saying, we're only going to consider what the joint venture has done. So if it's the first time you submit an offer as a joint venture, you don't have any experience or past performance. But that's not what these laws say. These laws that are in the Small Business Act say, if that's the case, if the joint venture doesn't have any experience or past performance, you should consider the capabilities of the members of the joint venture. So we've been trying to point these out to agencies along the way.
So I just want to tag on, I get asked a lot for AFCEC, again, I'm not speaking for the entire Air Force, but for AFCEC purposes, do we kind of cringe when we see a proposal from a joint venture? Does it go against you if a joint venture submits a proposal? And I will tell you, as long as you meet the RFP criteria, we don't care if you're a prime sub-relationship, just a prime by yourself, or if you're actually a joint venture submitting a proposal. It makes no difference to us who the prime is. So we don't have any bad thoughts about, oh, this is a joint venture. And we treat it the way the law says it should be treated.
And this is especially important for people that participate in our mentor protege program. The whole reason you get into the protege program is that you lack certain capabilities, and so that's why we allow you the mentor to provide these things to you, and in exchange for that, you're allowed to joint venture. But making sure that at least the mentor's capabilities will be considered along with the proteges is helpful, I think, to get that program operating the way it's supposed to be operating. Again, these are just citations to, this is from the Small Business Act, what I kind of just said, that we want to, if the JV doesn't have it, that the other members should be able to be considered as part of that. And there's also a section that says that if you do this kind of teaming, it's not going to count against you in terms of you're going to be affiliated by participating under these laws.
We have a quick.
For these, I think we're talking usually about joint ventures because, well, for SDVO, like I said before, you can use a subcontractor to help you meet the limitations of subcontracting. Because of the ways the laws are written, we allow it for SDVO and HubZone because the law was silent. But because it was very specific with respect to small 8A and women-owned, we don't allow it until the FAR gets changed. So as a veteran, you could use that as part of that.
But you don't have to.
You have another question? Or do you want to wait?
Can we just wait on the questions, please? Sorry. So they can just go. Thank you.
Okay, so the next hot topic is cybersecurity compliance mandate. DoD understands the importance of addressing cybersecurity. October was Cybersecurity Awareness Month at NAVFAC, and there was a lot of focus and training on providing awareness of how to safeguard government data or government information, as well as your own personal data. In 2018, the DoD National Defense Strategy addressed cybersecurity, and DoD also implemented a cybersecurity strategy. So it has become a hot topic, and for good reason. In June, Chinese hackers stole sensitive Navy submarine plans from a contractor. So government data can be compromised. And if hackers cannot access data directly from the government, then they can target our contractors. So if you're managing DoD information on your systems, then that data should be safeguarded from cyber incidents. And that's when you can look at the clause, hence the clause, the DFARS clause, that discusses safeguarding, covered, no, not covered, it's controlled classified information. So it's so many different classifications to the data. So it's controlled, unclassified information, as well as covered defense information. So if you look at the clause, you can see all the different classifications. They provide different definitions if you do that. Let's see. And per the clause, contractors are required to demonstrate compliance to safeguarding the information, which requires contractors to implement National Institute and Standardize, which is the NIST 800-171, to have a system security plan associated with a plan of action. So you can have your security plan detailing how you're going to, like what controls you're going to put in place to manage, safeguard the information. And if you can't do it, or if you have issues, or if you don't have the controls available, you have to come up with a plan of action that's required. So it depends on the activity, the requiring activities, if the DFARS clause is going to be incorporated in the solicitation. So if you do see the clause, then you just want to make sure you research, you understand it, you understand again the definitions and all of the requirements. And if you have any questions, you should contact that contracting officer. And so when I, going forward with NAVFAC, I talked to our CIO director, and basically she stated that we would like to partner and work with our industry partners just to smartly, come up with a smart solution and come up with, so you guys may already have practices in place. So we want to look at what's the commercial best practices as well. So with doing so, contractors need to consider the information that they're going to need to have access to. Some information you may not require access to, you may not want to be responsible for, a lot, like with the Navy. Hackers can put together sensitive information and just kind of like get an idea of some of our bases, some of our buildings, and you just don't know, compromising that information, that data can be very compromising if they put it together and kind of understand how we're set up logistically. So you just want to be aware of that, the type of data and the safeguard. So right now, OSD is hosting town halls on cybersecurity challenges. They hosted one in July in Alabama, and I think it was Huntsville, and they're gonna host another one in San Diego coming up. So you can look at, I think they're working in conjunction with DAU. So you can go to DAU's website and kind of register for those town halls if they're in your area. Another resource is FTC and DHS. They have a lot of resources regarding cybersecurity and how it's applicable to small businesses. And there's going to be another training here at SAME. I think it's tomorrow at 10:45. They're going to have another class discussing the impacts of cybersecurity in small business.
Yeah, you went one. Am I next?
There it is, that star.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm representing the Corps of Engineers and the Army, and I brought some experts with me. I'd like to introduce real quickly Ms. Pam Monroe. She is here on behalf of the Department of the Army, and she is the lead program manager and subject matter expert on all things related to a very important topic, which is small business utilization and subcontracting. And sprinkled throughout the audience, I have some awesome small business directors from the Corps of Engineers, all our small business professionals from the Army Corps of Engineers. If you're there, can you stand up and let our folks know that you're in the room? These are my experts as well on this topic. And what I'm here to share with you today, thank you, we have such an awesome team. What I'm here to share with you is a very high interest item. It's a topic of interest. It's a priority for the Corps of Engineers, and in partnership with the Army, which is and it is a priority about small business utilization and subcontracting. And what came out earlier this year, and our lead from the Army Small Business Office testified earlier this year about findings where prime contractors were required to make a good faith effort to provide small business opportunity. And through some inspections and interviews, what was revealed was that through prime contracts, small businesses were not being offered fair opportunity, were missing out on opportunity, and that we were not maybe holding our large businesses accountable for ensuring that opportunity to those small businesses. So I'm sharing some feedback with you today so that you're aware of that this topic is important to us and some of the things that we're doing to remedy it. We are leaning forward and teaming with our procurement officials to advocate on this issue. So not only training in the government and with our contracting and acquisition professionals about how to monitor the subcontracting plans for compliance, but enforcing it when compliance is not being met. What does that mean for you all in industry? Do we use our tools like contractor performance assessment reports, CPARs? If we're going to penalize companies for not utilizing the small businesses in their subcontracting plan, what would that look like? Those are the things that we are discussing. So you should be aware that if you've been part of either a participant in subcontracting, if you're a large business prime in the audience. Are there any large businesses in the audience today? Yes. You know, it's very important to you that you get credit for your small business goals, right? The large businesses. We report that at first tier. There's a lot of information coming out, the SBLOs through the regional trainings about how to account for first tier, second tier, all that reporting. But also important is, are you using those small businesses in the subcontracting plans that were promised to the government when you submitted your proposal? We hear a lot from industry, like what Mary said, no one checks, so I'm just gonna keep doing what I want. Those days are those are over. We are being held accountable for compliance, and you're gonna start feeling it. And our partners in the Army across several commands, if you attended the Huntsville Center Industry Day, you heard it there coming out of the Corps of Engineers, that we are listening more on this topic, and the small businesses deserve that fair opportunity. So we're looking at all of the issues and what that remedy looks like. And there is increased scrutiny to monitor that. And so aside from the training with the procurement officials, training of our small business folks, teaming up with procurement technical assistance centers, the goal is to also arm some small businesses that need it to empower you to understand what action you may also be able to take. And armed with some of that information, you may be able to get advocates, whether it's from surety companies, bonding. What do you do if you're not being utilized in the subcontract the way that you're supposed to? And how can that issue get solved better? So I've been talking to some folks since I've been here, just just this morning we kicked off and we were eating lunch at a table, and a group of us were talking about this very issue and trying to come up with some solutions on what we would do. And in the A&E and construction world, it's amazing the tools some of our small businesses have to try and help them along in this issue, whether it's seeking assistance from a surety or a bonding company and reporting certain things that aren't getting done. There may be certain protections out there. You have a lot of advocates here this week from not only the Corps of Engineers, but our other agencies in the room, such as Mary and Bianca as well. We want to hear from you on some of these issues. So I thought it was important today to share with you one of these high interest items from the Corps of Engineers when it comes to small business utilization and compliance with the subcontracting plan. And I think the end of October, was it October 30th, Pam? Your reports were due in ESRS too. So we're just starting, all of those are coming together this year, and we'll have some good reporting going forward. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to share. Down here at the bottom is this website from the DoD's Office of Small Business Program. There's a lot of tools available for all of you to look at when it comes to the topic of subcontracting. I recommend that you visit those sites and tap into some of the regional council meetings that are going on. We have some SBLOs that are very active. There's a lot of advocacy out there, and on this website you'll find posted a schedule of some of those events as well. That's all I have to share with you today. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk very briefly about CPARS. This morning in the Small Business Council meeting, the guest speaker did a CPARS presentation. And I understand all the slides are going to be posted, and they were very detailed slides. She only got through maybe 4 before she was just bombarded with questions from the audience. There's also a breakout session tomorrow morning on CPARS. So this obviously is a pretty important topic to the government as well as to industry. The overwhelmingly response from industry this morning, and my takeaway is that as small businesses, y'all are concerned about challenging the write-up in CPARS, and when you get a negative write-up that you don't concur with, or you get one that says satisfactory and you think you did better than satisfactory, you're hesitant to submit any comments or to contact the reviewing official and ask for a meeting. You do have the right to ask for a meeting when you get your CPARS information, and you have 60 days to respond. Within the first 7 days, you can go to the assessing official and request a meeting to talk about their write-up and their evaluation. So you have that opportunity. If the assessing official is not responsive, as I heard this morning, then you can go directly to the reviewing official. You have to do it within the 7 days, or they chances are won't let you have the meeting because that's what the rules say you have to do. So don't wait. I heard a business this morning in the session say that their internal person that was to reply to the CPARS and say whether they agreed with the rating or not, got busy. Well, we all get busy. It was a less than stellar evaluation. 60 days came and went, and they lost, I think he said, a $240 million contract as a result. So if you think of your CPARS evaluation as your appraisal of how you're doing as a contractor, and if you know that CPARS is a government's way of, I'm not even looking at my notes, I need to look at my notes, but if you think of CPARS as a government's way to assess your performance, and we say whether you're satisfactory or unsat or excellent or whatever the different ratings are, that affects all your future opportunities for contracts if you get an unsat. Because the source selection teams that are doing follow-on source selections to that, or any source selection across the DoD, actually I think it's across the federal government, they all have access to that. So if you get a bad rating with the Corps of Engineers, and now you've submitted a proposal with the Navy's gonna pull up and find that bad rating. So don't think that a negative rating is just within the Corps, because we all share that information. Our goal is not to award contracts to contractors who don't perform. Our goal is to award contracts to people that perform. So we're using that. It's imperative as a government official that we do a timely evaluation and that we are detailed and complete, and we keep it as objective as possible and not subjective, so that we have good backup, supportable information, especially if we give you a negative rating. You need to know that all CPARS information is treated as for official use only or as source selection sensitive information, and that many times we have contractors who are assisting our source selection teams, but they do not have access to your CPARS ratings. So when we're briefing the SSA, the contractor team that's part of the evaluation team has to get up and leave the room so they don't hear any of the negative or positive performance information. Don't wait until you get a negative rating in CPARS to say, Mr. CO, Miss CO, I need to talk to you, we got a problem. Your very first kickoff meeting, talk to that person. If they don't tell you how you're gonna be evaluated in CPARS, ask them about it. Tell me about CPARS, what are you gonna evaluate me against? How do we make sure we're good? Continue and keep that open line of communication with the CO through the entire period of performance. Just as if, Dave, I'm gonna ask you to stand up, because I think we're the only Air Force employees in here. Dave works with me up at the Wright-Patterson office. So this morning when the Corps of Engineers, all these millions of people stood up, they were all in the front of the room. I said, okay, don't ask the Air Force, because there's like 5 of us in the back of the room in the last row, and nobody would see us. But we are here, we're here to help. But keep your lines of communication open the entire period of performance. Don't wait till you get that bad report, just as I wouldn't wait until it's appraisal time to tell Dave he's not doing a good job. Hopefully I've been telling him along the way. You want to know that along the way so that you can improve your performance if need be by the time you get your rating. Don't miss your 7 days if you want to meet face-to-face. Don't miss your 60 days and not respond and end up with a less than stellar rating. And just remember that this is your appraisal. It's how well you did on that project, but it's going to affect your opportunity to get future projects. And I see you're standing up, so, okay. All right. I always go last, and it always is like...
It's for a reason.
Okay.
Well, Mary, Donna, Bianca, and Ken, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We do have over 10 minutes for Q&A, so I'd like to, the gentleman that asked the question, you go, please.
It doesn't, it's a good question. It doesn't say anything about set-asides, from my recollection. It would apply to any solicitation for any work, based on my reading of it.
Please.
I'm the CPARS, Mary, and maybe this is for everyone. We had an incident where we got a CPARS, we provided the comments within the time frame, but when the final was printed, our comments were not included in that CPARS, which in some cases would say, yeah, not to be, you said this, I said that, but sometimes it would explain whatever comment the government made. The contractor would explain, well, here's the situation, here's what's happened. So is there a requirement that when it is published as final, the whole thing, including what the government said, what the contractor said, whatever the last official that says, I agree, I disagree, or whatever, that the to be printed or be available when the final is printed?
To my understanding, it's all supposed to be like that. So the assessing official, I mean, it's supposed to, the entire conversation, the assessing official makes their comments, contractor has the opportunity to rebut those comments, and then if you do rebut those comments, automatically the reviewing official, it's supposed to be flagged so they can see that there were comments added, and they're supposed to review those comments, but the entire conversation history is supposed to be there.
If I may add to that, unless the reviewing official decides to change the ratings, then they could publish the final ratings with a caveat that says, this has been amended. So if someone's looking for source selection, if you're looking up a CCAS, there is a footnote that says it's been amended, so you can go to the original or whatever to see the communications that go back and forth. We have seen that.
Yeah, I said, luckily, when we put our comments in, I kept a copy.
Yeah, they're supposed to publish that.
To keep, but like I say, when we had to submit it, as here's the final that was actually published, if you will.
Yeah,
All of our
yeah.
comments were no longer there, there was nothing.
That's not good.
And I guess my question is, if we come up with that again, what do we say? What is our recourse? What can we do about that?
So it's my understanding, once it goes final, it's final, and there's no change in it, right? So I'm taking an action item to see now how we get that word back out to everybody. Maybe we would do it through the Small Business Council and some of their publications, so it goes out to the general membership. I'm not sure, Bonnie, I need to find out, but government officials, yeah, well, yeah, and we're not allowed to take your comments out. The comments have to stay in there, and the reviewing official has to leave them in there and look at them and then make an assessment. I don't really have an answer for you, but I'll
Okay.
research this and we'll figure out how to get it back out.
Okay.
So the chief of contracting in the Walla district for the Corps of Engineers, and I have actually pulled a final CCARS that was incorrectly written. You can go to the agency that owns CCARS and say you want it removed if you're a reviewing official or an assessing official. And so I have pulled one back that it was incorrectly done. So that would be one thing I would tell you. And then for a recourse, if your comments weren't there, I would get a hold of the contracting officer when you awarded the contract. Let them know that something had happened or that your comments were missing and ask them to look into it for you and keep going up that chain on the contracting officer side. That's what I would encourage you to do.
So one of the comments this morning also for help, if you're not getting a response from the contracting officer, is contact the small business office. And although they can't change anything, they can help elevate it up the chain of command on the contracting side if the CO is being unresponsive to you. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Look a little bit more closely at it, because we had one where we thought the comments disappeared, but they were actually there. They're just towards the bottom, so they're not, so let's say here's quality, here's what the government said. Our comment wasn't there, it was at the bottom. Yeah, no, section.
Yeah, I've seen all the comments in the bottom, and this was one where we were actually saying, well, wait a minute, you know, here's what you did, and here's how we responded, so how can you say,
Yeah, there's something wrong with that.
and that's at the bottom, and it was at the bottom of the one that I made a copy of, when it was published as final. It wasn't there at the bottom or anywhere else.
Thanks, Bonnie. Yes, question.
So is part of that also to bring money back into a low socioeconomic area besides the employment?
Yes, that's a good question. It applies based on economic statistics data to areas of high unemployment and low income, rural, urban, you name it. And there's a requirement to employ 35% of your employees be hub zone residents. But there's also a requirement that your principal office be in a hub zone, where the most of your employees perform work need to be in a hub zone.
So, going on that, and I know that this is kind of specific to probably Alaska Native and Native American tribes, but, with Hub Zone, it's almost impossible to do business in that area. So like, my place is a village out in the middle of nowhere that you can only get to by boat or by plane, has no internet connection, these kinds of things. So we have to come into Anchorage to do work. But that automatically almost disqualifies us, even though all of the money that we make goes back to that socioeconomic area, or to that area. But we have to follow these hub zones that are different. So, and I don't know about Native American tribes, but I'm wondering if they've ever thought about investment in these areas, meaning, if you have a guarantee of so much money going back into a certain area, then you can qualify for hub zone work, as long as you have a guarantee of money back into an area, for any corporation.
Well, the one thing I'll say is that we do, for the principal office issue, we do exclude, we only count employees that are not at job site locations, so you exclude those. If you have someone working on a project or at a base, those aren't counted for determining where your principal office is. So that's what our rules currently say. And in response to this rule, there's a 60-day comment period. I encourage all of you, if you're interested in Hub Zone or you're in Hub Zone, to provide comments on things you like and things you don't like, and suggest things. It's open for 60 days. You can go to regulations.gov, you do it online, and just say, here's my problem, and give us something that we can think about to see if we can come up with a solution. Or give us a solution, even better. Yep.
Any other questions? Keep them coming, please. Yes.
Back to CMARS, just a second. I can see how this could cut both ways, good and bad, but when a company experiences a change in control, do the CMARS follow the company? Change of ownership.
Yes. Can a CO answer that for?
Well, if the
Yes.
resume, yeah.
I think it would go off of the DUNS number and the cage code.
Right.
It follows the DUNS number?
Duns. And the cage code.
Well, in an asset purchase, the company changes the name, but retains the entire ownership team, the entire employees. So it's essentially the same company, but it's a different employee tax number, different DUNS number, or tax reporting. So again, I can see if you have bad past performance and you want to avoid it, then it takes breaks setting your company up. But if you're the new owner of the company and it has good CPARs, you'd like to use it for solicitation. So
It's DUNS specific. When you submit a CPARS, it's associated with a DUNS number, and if you have new ownership, you're gonna get a new.
So maybe you could,
A lot of procurements that I've seen recently have asked if your DUNS number has changed, under what is your CPARs. So, and there's a lot of them too, especially on Corps of Engineers, in the contracting section, where they'll ask you sort of a history of the company.
right, right.
And in that area, you can talk about, and again, I'm not a contracting officer, I'm with a small business, but that's where I've seen companies that have gone through that I've teamed with, that provide me that information to put into my, proposal to explain. And then a lot of times too, they'll say, as your first cover page, sort of again, in the contracting, what are the names of all your teaming partners, what are the DUNS and page numbers? And I would say, if it were me and that happened and you've got good CPARs, then I would say, this is the new one, here's what the old one was, their CPARs are all under this, they just changed ownership.
Right.
And if they need more information, we can always provide that. But that's what I've seen, especially in a lot of Corps of Engineers, procurements.
Try it out and let us know next year. See how it goes. Yes, Ben?
Question for Ken, is there any more specific updates on the 2018 FAR case regarding REAs and holding agency detrimental to our, cash flow.
Yeah, I mean, it was just in the 2019 NDAA, so they have a case open and they're working on it at the FAR Small Business Committee, but it's gonna take a long time to get finalized. You know, we still have to go through the clearance process and the proposed rule comment period. And then the data on it, we don't think it's available. So how are we gonna start collecting how the agency's been doing? So it's gonna be a challenge. It's a baby step based on the concerns of this community. But I can't tell you that it's gonna be anytime soon, unfortunately.
I guess for the whole panel, is there any suggestions for small businesses to help push those, RAs forward or find resolution in the meantime?
So I'll tell you, it seems like lately, I'm CC'd on a lot of emails that are going to the contracting office. And so when they CC me, then that puts me in the loop, so I can stay in the loop and what's the status, we're hurting the small business, they're not getting paid, we need to get them paid. I don't have any contractual authority other than being able to elevate things to the commander if I need to, if they're just dragging. I don't know that everybody else wants to be CC'd on everything, but involving the small business office just for awareness purposes sometimes helps.
Yeah, I agree. I want to emphasize that too. At the Corps of Engineers, you have a lot of advocates out there in the small business offices across the nation. So when you include us in that conversation, it helps us frame our messaging, and we know exactly where to target the conversation to get you the assistance that you need. And it also holds us accountable because we're on the email. So we receive the information, and most of us take it very seriously. You know, we hold ourselves accountable for taking the action so that we can get you the assistance that you need. So don't hesitate to use your advocates. It's not something that's looked at negatively. We receive it as something positive because we need to help you resolve something.
Right, so our jobs are not just pre-award only. You know, you get out there, you do an RFI, and you set your acquisition strategy, and it's a small business set aside, and you get the contracts awarded, and you're done. We do a whole lot of post-award work also with helping to resolve issues, and so if you can think of us as pre- and post-award support, I think that may help you.
Thank you, Ben. Ben's from a design firm, so I feel the pain. I think it really impacts contractors as well with the REAs. It's a hot topic. Maybe next year. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you again, panelists.